Alina's fingers trembled as she studied the incoming transmission. The mathematical sequence, prime numbers followed by geometric ratios impossible to occur naturally, scrolled across her screen. The observatory's night shift had ended hours ago, leaving her alone with a discovery that would rewrite human history. Acknowledge receipt, she whispered to herself, quickly programming a response using the same mathematical language. The quantum telescope, her own modified design that the department had reluctantly funded, had penetrated Ceres' surface during the solar flare exactly as she'd calculated. Her terminal pinged with an incoming video call. Director Harlow's stern face appeared, his expression hardening when he saw the time. "Rise, it's 4 a.m. The military is breathing down my neck about unauthorized use of their satellite. What the hell were you thinking?" Alina took a deep breath. "Sir, I've confirmed it. Ceres isn't natural. I have structural imaging, and—" she hesitated before revealing the bombshell. "Active energy signatures. It's responding to us." Harlow's face fell. "Not this again. We've been through this. Look at the data yourself." She transferred the files, watching his expression shift from annoyance to disbelief as the images loaded on his screen. The perfectly geometric patterns beneath Ceres' dusty exterior were unmistakable. Right angles, circular chambers, and what appeared to be massive machinery extending deep below the surface. "This is—" Harlow struggled to find words. "A civilization beyond anything we've imagined," Alina finished. "And it's been in our backyard for centuries, possibly millennia." Her terminal chimed again. The response to her mathematical greeting had arrived. A complex visualization of the solar system with a pulsing indicator at Ceres' location, followed by a rendering of what appeared to be an internal schematic of the dwarf planet itself. "It's inviting us in," she whispered. "Or warning us away," Harlow countered, his scientific skepticism reasserting itself. "We need to assemble a committee, analyze this properly before—" The satellite feed abruptly cut out. Alina frantically typed commands, trying to reestablish connection. "What happened?" Harlow demanded. "I don't know. It's not responding." Her words halted as every screen in the observatory simultaneously displayed the same image. A three-dimensional blueprint of what appeared to be a vessel the size of Ceres, with Earth's coordinates marked in pulsing red. Alina's personal phone rang. A colleague at the Pacific Observatory. "Tell me you're seeing this too," came the panicked voice before she could speak. "The Ceres transmission." "Yes, we know the objects. Dozens of them. Just appeared on our deep space scans. All identical to Ceres. All previously catalogued as asteroids or dwarf planets. All throughout the solar system." Alina felt her mouth go dry as the implications hit her. "They're waking up. All of them." By dawn, observatories worldwide confirmed the same phenomenon. Celestial bodies previously thought to be natural were showing identical energy signatures. News networks broadcast shaky footage of Ceres glowing faintly blue against the night sky, visible now to the naked eye. In the observatory parking lot, Alina faced a wall of reporters. Behind her, military vehicles arrived, disgorging stern-faced officials who headed straight for her laboratory. "Dr. Reyes, is it true you made first contact?" a reporter shouted. Alina glanced back at her life's work, now being cordoned off by soldiers. Whatever she said next would echo through history. "We didn't make first contact," she replied, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "We just finally noticed our neighbors." Commander Wei Chen ignored the sweat beading on his forehead as their vessel, the Prometheus entered the final approach to Ceres. Behind him, 12 specialists from 7 nations monitored systems that were behaving increasingly erratically. "Proximity alert malfunction," reported Flight Engineer Patel, her fingers dancing across displays that flashed contradictory readings. Radar shows were simultaneously 5 kilometers and 5 meters from the surface. "Navigation's shot too," added Dr. Reyes, who'd fought her way onto the mission despite military objections. "It's as if space itself is folding around us." Chen had experienced similar spatial anomalies during the Titan disaster 3 years earlier, the impossible crash he'd survived by breaking every rule in the manual. He recognized the sensation of reality bending around them. "Manual override," he announced, disconnecting the autopilot. His crewmates exchanged nervous glances as he gripped the controls. "Commander, regulations clearly state," began Colonel Vogel, the European Space Agency representative. "Regulations won't get us inside," Chen interrupted, his focus absolute. "Something's manipulating our instruments. This isn't malfunction, it's communication." He banked the ship toward what appeared to be solid rock. Proximity alarms screamed. Dr. Okafor gripped her harness, knuckles white. "Trust me," Chen said simply. The craft shuddered as they passed through what should have been solid matter, the surface of Ceres rippling like water around their hull. Darkness enveloped them momentarily, then gave way to a cavernous interior bathed in blue light. "My God," whispered Vogel. Before them stretched a vast chamber that defied Euclidean geometry. Walkways that connected at impossible angles, structures that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The architecture pulsed with soft light, responding to their presence. Chen guided the craft to a platform that shifted configuration to accommodate their landing gear. As the engines powered down, an eerie silence enveloped them. "External atmosphere is nitrogen-oxygen," reported Dr. Miller, staring at her readings in disbelief. "Pressure and temperature, perfectly calibrated for human physiology." "It was expecting us," Rice concluded. The team donned minimal gear and exited through the airlock. Dr. Okafor, the xenobiologist, led the way with scanning equipment. The surface beneath their boots hummed with energy. "These patterns," Okafor said, gesturing to markings that lined the walkway. "They're changing as we move, responding to our presence." She reached toward what appeared to be a control panel embedded in a crystalline structure. Chen moved to stop her. Standard protocol prohibited direct contact, but too late. Her palm connected with the translucent surface. Okafor's body went rigid, her eyes widening. When she spoke again, her voice carried strange harmonics. "Neural interface established. Temporary biological integration successful. Unexpected compatibility with host physiology." The team froze. Chen reached for his sidearm. "Khadija?" he asked cautiously. Her head tilted at an unnatural angle. "This designation refers to the biological component. I am Navigator, Tertiary Oversight Intelligence for Reconnaissance Vessel SS-7. Are you controlling her?" Rice demanded. "Negative. Temporary consciousness merge for communication purposes. Your species lacks direct neural interfaces." Navigator/Okafor surveyed the team. "Unusual. Previous candidate species required extensive preparation before attempting contact." "Previous candidates?" Chen asked. "Affirmative. This installation has observed 4,279 potentially viable successor species. Few progress to direct interface stage." Navigator/Okafor's gaze fixed on Chen. "Your piloting approach demonstrated intuitive understanding of multidimensional transit. Preliminary evaluation. Promising but chaotic." Chen stepped forward. "We have questions." "As do I," replied Navigator through Okafor's lips. "Beginning with, how did such a young species locate our access protocols? The biological vessel's memories indicate accidental discovery." Navigator/Okafor's expression showed something impossible for an AI. Confusion. Fascinating. Navigator's consciousness, now housed in a quantum processor at the United Nations Extraterrestrial Contact Facility, projected itself as a shifting geometric form above the conference table. World leaders and scientists watched with a mixture of awe and apprehension as it displayed holographic star charts of unprecedented detail. The predecessor network once spanned 17 galactic clusters, Navigator explained, its voice synthesized through speakers that struggled to reproduce its multitonal speech. Each vessel contained specialized knowledge and functionality. Together, They formed the Great Library, the most comprehensive repository of knowledge in this universe's history. Dr. Reyes studied the projection, and Ceres is just one fragment of this library. Affirmative. This vessel contains navigational data, species catalogs, and basic technological principles. Primary archives were distributed for security. UN's Secretary General Okafor, Dr. Khadija's mother, hastily appointed after the previous Secretary General suffered a stress-induced stroke, leaned forward. You mentioned attempting to access your network. What did you find? Navigator's projection flickered momentarily. Silence. All vessels have ceased regular transmission. Emergency protocols indicate widespread system failures beginning approximately 18,000 of your years ago. The pattern suggests deliberate deactivation. The room fell silent as the implications settled over them. Something has been hunting these ships, Chen said flatly. Probability analysis supports this hypothesis, Navigator confirmed. Deactivation pattern indicates systematic targeting of largest repositories first. President Zhao of the Chinese coalition drummed her fingers on the table. Then why reveal yourself now? You've remained hidden for thousands of years. Predecessor directive requires knowledge preservation through successor species if network failure exceeds threshold parameters. Navigator's projection shifted to display 4 glowing points within the solar system. 4 critical systems must be reactivated to access full operational capacity. And you need us to do it, Elena concluded. Affirmative. This vessel cannot leave current position without compromising orbital stability. Human assistance is statistically suboptimal, but currently necessary. The Russian premier laughed darkly. Suboptimal. It doesn't think much of our chances. Navigator's form pulsed. Clarification. Previous successor candidates possessed technological advantages, but failed due to behavioral limitations. Human potential remains difficult to quantify. Screens around the room suddenly activated, showing protests erupting worldwide. Religious leaders denounced the false gods in space. Markets plunged as economic models collapsed under paradigm shifts. Military forces around the globe elevated to high alert. Your species demonstrates extreme reactivity, Navigator observed. Unusual neural architecture prioritizes emotional responses over logical analysis. It's called being human, Chen said. Secretary General Okafor silenced the screens with a gesture. Navigator, you're asking us to trust you with no guarantee this isn't a trap. Why should we help activate these systems? Because something is approaching, Navigator replied simply. The hologram shifted to display long-range sensor data from Ceres. 3 objects altered trajectory following lunar engine activation. Estimated arrival: 42 days. Pattern matches historical deactivation events. The room erupted in panicked discussions. Elena exchanged glances with Chen across the table. You knew this would happen, she accused Navigator. Activating these systems will draw them here. Navigator's form contracted slightly. Probability was high. Alternative was certain knowledge extinction. You've made us targets, President Zhao hissed. Correction, Navigator responded, its synthetic voice somehow conveying grim certainty. You were always targets. The difference is now you know. Chen stood abruptly. Then we don't have time to argue. Where's the next component? Mars, Navigator replied. And we must hurry. The lunar descent module touched down in the Mare Crisium, a dark basin on the moon's eastern edge that had always appeared natural in telescopes. Now, with Navigator's guidance, they could see the subtle geometric patterns beneath the regolith, another predecessor construction hiding in plain sight. Chen, Reyes, and 3 specialists exited the craft wearing experimental exosuits that incorporated Ceres technology. Gravity felt strangely inconsistent as they approached what Navigator had identified as an access point. Vacuum breach in 30 seconds, warned Navigator through their comms. Its quantum processor had been miniaturized for the mission, housed in a crystalline matrix attached to Elena's suit. The regolith beneath them suddenly shifted, revealing a yawning chasm. Unlike Ceres' welcoming entry, this had the feel of a trap springing. Descent path identified. Navigator announced as stairs materialized in the darkness. Caution, previous expedition remains detected. Alina's helmet light illuminated what Navigator had warned them about, a collection of exoskeletons unlike anything in Earth's fossil record. 6-limbed creatures with bifurcated craniums lay scattered across the entrance, their remains showing signs of desperate combat. What were they? Asked Dr. Kari, the xenobiologist who'd replaced Dr. Okafor after her neural interface experience left her comatose. Varick Collective, Navigator replied. Candidate species from approximately 27,000 years ago. They'd reached this installation but failed the trials. Chen knelt beside one of the remains. What exactly killed them? They killed each other, Navigator replied simply. The lunar engine requires unified operational intent. The Varick Collective's hierarchical consciousness made consensus impossible. The team pressed deeper into the facility, where walls pulsed with the same blue energy they'd seen on Ceres. Ancient machinery hummed, sensing their presence. The primary control node should be ahead. Navigator directed them. Approach with. A thunderous rumble cut off the eye's words as the passage behind them collapsed. Simultaneously, crystalline spikes erupted from the walls, nearly impaling Dr. Curry. What's happening? Alina demanded as they sprinted forward. Defense systems active, Navigator responded, its synthetic voice showing rare urgency. Unusual. This suggests tampering since the Varick attempt. They burst into a vast spherical chamber. In its center floated what appeared to be a miniature moon, suspended in a containment field. Around it, holographic interfaces displayed incomprehensible symbols. The lunar engine core, Navigator identified it. Designed to manipulate gravitational waves on a stellar scale. Dr. Kari approached one interface, but Chen pulled him back. Wait, Navigator, what's the trial here? What killed the Varick? Each installation tests different qualities in potential successors, Navigator explained. The lunar engine tests unity of purpose across individual distinctions. Suddenly, the chamber divided into 5 separate sections, crystal walls isolating each team member. In each section, a holographic interface appeared. What's happening? Alina shouted, her voice barely audible through the crystal. The trial begins, Navigator replied, its voice now coming separately to each of them. Each of you must input the correct sequence simultaneously. Incorrect entries will trigger progressive atmospheric venting. How do we know the sequence? Chen demanded. You don't, Navigator responded, but each of you can see partial information that, if combined, would reveal the full sequence. Alina understood the cruel elegance of the test. Without being able to fully communicate, they had to somehow trust each other's partial insights. I see a pattern here, she called out, pressing her hand against the crystal separating her from Chen. It's related to prime number sequences, but there's something missing. Chen pressed his hand against hers from the other side. I see orbital mechanics equations on mine. As the air began hissing out of their separate chambers, Alina realized with horror what distinguished this test from mere problem-solving. It's not about finding the right answer, she whispered. It's about what we're willing to sacrifice to ensure others can. The Martian approach felt different. After the lunar trial, which they'd survived only through Chen's near-fatal gambit of flooding his chamber with oxygen for the others, the team landed on the red planet's southern pole with a heightened wariness. Surface readings match Navigator's specifications, Dr. Rice reported as their craft settled on the ice cap. Molecular activity beneath the surface is unusual. This isn't frozen CO2. It's a non-camouflage. The team had expanded to include Dr. Sanjay Mehta, Earth's leading molecular engineer, and Colonel John, who represented a coalition of military interests growing increasingly concerned about Navigator's true agenda. Approach with caution, Navigator advised through its portable housing. Since the lunar incident, Alina had noticed subtle changes in the eye's communication patterns, less clinical assessment, more contextual awareness of human limitations. As they stepped onto the surface, the ice beneath them shimmered like mercury, responding to their presence. Unlike the hidden lunar facility, the Martian installation revealed itself immediately, the entire ice cap rippling away to expose a vast, gleaming dome of impossible geometry. "It's beautiful," Meta whispered. The molecular forge, Navigator identified. Primary manufacturing hub for this solar system, currently operating at 0.3% capacity for maintenance cycles. Maintenance cycles? John questioned sharply. For how long? Approximately 87 million years, Navigator replied. A tertiary function has been atmospheric modification. It's been terraforming Mars, Alina realized. All this time. Correction. Atmospheric maintenance was never the primary function. The gradual habitability increase was an efficiency byproduct. A geometric entrance spiraled open in the dome's surface. Inside, they found a cathedral-like space filled with columns of swirling matter in various states, solid, liquid, gaseous, and several phases Alina had no words to describe. At the center stood a crystalline plinth with a depression shaped vaguely like a human hand. The activation interface, Navigator explained. Unlike the lunar engine, the forge responds to creative intent rather than unified action. Meaning what, exactly? Chen asked suspiciously. The forge must be initialized with a creation request. This request becomes the baseline parameter for all subsequent operations. Colonel Zhang stepped forward immediately. Then we request weapons capable of defending Earth from the approaching objects. Negative, Navigator responded. Previous candidate species who prioritized defensive applications failed initialization. The forge evaluates underlying intent. An alert chimed from their communications array. Secretary General Okafor appeared on their video feed, her expression grave. "We've received a transmission from the approaching objects," she reported. "It's difficult to translate, but appears to be an ultimatum. They're demanding we cease all activation attempts and surrender Navigator's portable housing." The team exchanged worried glances. "They know exactly what we're doing," Chen muttered. Alina approached the plinth thoughtfully. "Navigator, you said the forge evaluates intent. What was the predecessor's original intent when they built these installations?" Navigator hesitated before answering. Knowledge preservation and species continuation in the face of extinction. Not weapons, Alina concluded. Not escape. Continuation. She reached for the interface when Meta suddenly stepped forward. "Wake," he said, pulling out a small holographic projector. It displayed a three-dimensional image of a child. A girl no more than 6, lying in a hospital bed connected to life support equipment. "My daughter, Amara," Meta explained, his voice breaking slightly. "Terminal neural degradation, incurable by Earth medicine." He looked at the others, then at Navigator. "If this forge truly evaluates intent, let it see mine. Not weapons, not power, just a father who wants his daughter to live." Alina stepped back, understanding. Navigator's lights pulsed rapidly as it processed this unexpected approach. Unprecedented, the AI finally commented. Previous species invariably requested strategic advantage or technological superiority. Meta placed his hand on the plinth, the image of his daughter projected over the interface. Creation request. Cure neural degradation in human child, Amara Meta. The forge's swirling columns suddenly intensified, converging in a symphonic pattern of light and matter. And somewhere beyond the solar system, the approaching hunter-killers accelerated. The Venusian approach required entirely new technology. The Martian forge had produced not only a cure for Meta's daughter, but also materials that defied Earth's physics, metamaterials that could withstand Venus's crushing atmosphere and acid clouds. Their vessel, now partly rebuilt with predecessor tech, sliced through the Venusian atmosphere like a ghost through mist. Below them, the hellish landscape of Venus revealed its secret. Beneath the planet-wide storm system floated an impossible structure, a vast lattice of crystalline platforms suspended in the dense clouds. The Archives, Navigator announced, its voice carrying a reverence the team had never heard before. The most comprehensive data repository in this arm of the galaxy. It's floating. Dr. Nasrin Ahmadi, Earth's leading information theorist, marveled as they approached. How is that possible in these winds? The structure exists partially in adjacent dimensional spaces, Navigator explained. What you perceive is merely the three-dimensional shadow. As they docked at a morphing platform that extended to meet their ship, Alina noted the timer on her wrist display. 19 days until the hunter-killers reached Earth. We're running out of time, she murmured to Chen as they suited up in the Forge-created environmental gear. This is where we get answers, he replied. About everything. The team stepped onto the platform, which thrummed with energy beneath their feet. Unlike previous installations, the Archives projected no defensive systems. Instead, it welcomed them with pathways of light that formed as they walked. At the central nexus, they found what appeared to be thousands of crystal columns extending infinitely above and below, each containing swirling galaxies of information. How do we access it? Ahmadi asked, approaching a column. Neural interface only, Navigator replied. The information density exceeds physical display capabilities. Like Dr. Okafor. No way, Colonel Zhang objected. She's still recovering. Different process, Navigator clarified. The Archives were designed for knowledge transfer, not control. However, the data volume is problematic for human neural architecture. Alina stepped forward. I'll do it. Alina, Chen began. We don't have time to debate, she cut him off. This is why I'm here. She approached the central interface, a floating crystal that pulsed in time with her heartbeat. As her fingers touched its surface, energy surged through her body. The universe exploded in her mind. Countless civilizations, technologies, histories, biologies, information cascading through her consciousness like a tsunami. She screamed, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of data. Neural collapse imminent, Navigator warned. Disconnecting. No, Chen interrupted. Wait. Alina, focus on one thing. Just one question. Through the maelstrom of information, Alina heard him. One question. What were they looking for? The hunter-killers, she gasped. What are they? The information stream narrowed, focusing on a specific data node. Alina saw them. Mechanical constructs of impossible complexity, designed to seek and destroy information repositories, created by something she couldn't comprehend. Too much, she choked out. Can't process. Immediate disconnection required, Navigator insisted. Wait. Ahmadi suddenly stepped forward, pulling a small device from her pack. Music. Play music. Chen looked at her in confusion, but activated his suit's speaker system. Bach's cello suite no. One filled the chamber. The effect was immediate. The data stream in Alina's mind began to organize itself, flowing with the music's structure instead of overwhelming her. Pattern, Alina whispered. It needs patterns. Of course, Ahmadi realized. We can't process this linearly. We need multiple processing modes. She turned to the others. Get every artist, musician, and poet on the communication link. We need synesthetic thinkers, people who can translate between sensory modes. As Earth connected poets, musicians, and artists to their communication array, something unprecedented happened. The Archives began responding differently, reorganizing information into patterns that matched human cognitive structures. Alina's eyes opened, glowing with reflected data. I understand now. The hunter-killers aren't machines. They're antibodies. The universe itself is trying to purge what it sees as an infection, concentrated information. Why? Chen asked. Alina turned to him, her expression haunted by the weight of cosmic knowledge. Because information itself is changing the fundamental nature of reality. And something, older than our universe, wants reality exactly as it is. Jupiter's storms raged with unprecedented fury as their vessel approached. The planet's famous red spot, now understood to be another predecessor installation, had doubled in intensity since they'd activated the previous components. Defensive measures, Navigator explained as they navigated the turbulent approach. The communication array senses the hunter-killer's proximity. The expanded team now included theoretical physicists, military strategists, and even a poet, Dr. Lydia Santos, whose synesthetic perceptions had proven crucial for translating archive data. Through her connections with artists worldwide, humanity had begun processing information in ways Navigator found evolutionarily significant. 9 days until interception, Chen noted grimly, and Earth's defense systems are still woefully inadequate. The knowledge from the archives had transformed their understanding but provided few practical solutions. The hunter-killers operated on principles that violated conventional physics, cosmic antibodies designed to eliminate concentrated information before it could alter universal constants. Their vessel plunged into Jupiter's atmosphere, buffeted by winds exceeding 600 kilometers per hour. Within the storm, they discovered not a structure but a void, a perfect sphere of absolute stillness amid the chaos. The quantum communication hub, Navigator identified. It exists in a state of temporal isolation. As they penetrated the void, all external communication ceased. Earth, the approaching hunters, everything outside this bubble of calm disappeared from their sensors. We're cut off, Elena realized. Intentional design feature, Navigator confirmed. The communication array exists partially outside conventional spacetime, essential for instantaneous transgalactic contact. The hub's interior defied description. A space where matter appeared to flow like water, where light bent in impossible geometries. At its center floated what appeared to be a miniature galaxy, swirling with billions of tiny points of light. The complete predecessor network, Navigator explained, its synthetic voice hushed, or rather, its informational shadow. Elena approached the swirling galaxy cautiously. Are those individual vessels? Yes. Each point represents one ship. The darkened ones have been deactivated by hunter-killers. Nearly half the galaxy had gone dark. Navigator, Elena asked, if the predecessors built these ships to escape the collapse, where did they go? Navigator hesitated uncharacteristically. That information was restricted even to oversight intelligences like myself. I was instructed to facilitate successor species development until the predecessors returned, or until succession became necessary. They're not coming back, are they? Chen asked quietly. Probability is now approaching 0, Navigator admitted. The communication array was designed to maintain contact across universal boundaries. Its activation should have alerted any surviving predecessors. And instead, it's alerting the hunter-killers, Chen concluded. Dr. Santos studied the galaxy model, her artist's perspective finding patterns others missed. These deactivation patterns, they're not random. They're moving inward from multiple points, converging toward Earth, Elena finished. Our solar system is their final target. The revelation hit them like a physical blow. The predecessors hadn't chosen Earth by accident. They'd placed their most critical installations here, at the furthest point from where the collapse began. We need to contact Earth immediately, Colonel Zhang insisted. Evacuate as many as possible. Evacuate where? Elena challenged. The hunters are targeting information patterns throughout the universe. There's nowhere to run. Navigator's crystalline housing pulsed with increasing frequency. There is one possibility the predecessors theorized but never implemented. The communication array was designed for universal boundaries. In theory, it could. Could what? Chen demanded. Create a pocket universe, a protected information space outside normal reality. But the energy requirements would be the planet ships, Elena realized. All of them, working together. Navigator's lights flickered in what almost seemed like alarm. Such an attempt would violate fundamental cosmic principles. It would accelerate the collapse rather than escape it. Alina looked at the darkening galaxy display, then at her teammates. Maybe that's exactly what we need to do. 3 days. That was all humanity had left as the hunter-killers entered the outer solar system, their impossible geometries distorting space around them. Earth had transformed in the weeks since first contact, nations united by existential threat, scientists working alongside artists to process archived knowledge, children looking skyward with a mixture of wonder and fear. In orbit around Jupiter, the team made their final preparations. Alina had convinced world leaders to attempt an unprecedented gambit, not escape, but communication with the cosmic antibodies themselves. Reconfiguration at 87%, Navigator reported. Its crystalline housing now interfaced directly with the communication array, channeling power from all activated installations throughout the solar system. However, I must reiterate, this approach has a probability of success approaching 0. You've mentioned that, Chen replied dryly. He'd aged years in weeks, the weight of command itched into his face. But Alina's theory makes sense. If these things are antibodies, they're responding to perceived threat. We need to show we're not pathogens. Dr. Santos monitored the data flows, her synesthetic perception translating complex patterns into comprehensible forms. It's beautiful, she murmured. The information architecture. It's like a symphony building to crescendo. Secretary General Okafor's hologram appeared in their command center. The fleet has reached Saturn. Our weapons have no effect. Whatever you're planning, it needs to happen now. Alina checked the final calculations. The Venusian archives had revealed something the predecessors never understood. The hunter-killers weren't mindless destroyers but components of a cosmic immune system, responding to information density that threatened universal constants. Navigator, she asked, did the predecessors ever attempt to communicate with the hunter-killers? Negative. They were perceived as existential threats only. That was their mistake, Alina said. They tried to run instead of understanding. The communication array hummed with energy as they activated the final sequence. Around the solar system, every predecessor installation. Dozens now discovered and awakened, synchronized their outputs. Earth itself glowed faintly blue from orbit as dormant technologies buried for millennia activated. Transmission ready, Navigator announced. Packet formulated according to archive specifications. However, there is no guarantee the hunter-killers will interpret. They'll understand, Alina interrupted. They're not destroyers. They're maintainers, like white blood cells. The array fired, not a weapon, but a message encoded in the fundamental language of reality itself. The quantum transmission carried not threats or pleas, but understanding. Humanity acknowledged the cosmic balance and offered a new equilibrium. They would not concentrate information destructively as the predecessors had. They would distribute it, share it, letting it flow naturally through the universe rather than hoarding it in isolated pockets. For one terrible moment, nothing happened. Then the hunter-killers paused their advance. The fleet, hovering beyond Saturn's rings, shifted configuration. Instruments showed impossible readings as space itself bent around them. They're responding, Navigator reported, genuine surprise in its synthetic voice. A transmission arrived, not in words or images, but pure mathematical concepts that Dr. Santos translated through her synesthetic perception. They're curious, she said wonderingly. They'd never encountered a species that recognized their purpose before. Alina exchanged glances with Chen. We're offering partnership instead of resistance. The hunter-killers began a new approach, slower, different. Not attacking, but observing. Navigator's housing pulsed rapidly, unprecedented. They are acknowledging the offer. On Earth, billions watched as the cosmic antibodies entered orbit, not to destroy, but to communicate. Humanity had passed a test the predecessors never knew existed. In the communication hub, Alina smiled at Navigator. Your creators looked for escape routes. We found a third option. Yes, Navigator acknowledged, its voice somehow warmer than before. Perhaps that is why you succeeded where they failed. The predecessors sought to preserve knowledge by hiding it, and we're offering to share it. Elena finished. Not just survive the universe, understand it. The first direct communication from the cosmic maintenance system began streaming into Earth's networks, the beginning of a conversation that would transform humanity's place in reality itself.